I've got all three of my headers set in place. Now it's time to start attacking the rafters. So I'm using 2x6s as rafters because I have a 6-foot span, and that general rule of 1 foot of span per inch of depth is going to apply here. I have several 2x6s from these sheds that I deconstructed, and that's what I'm going to use. We're going for a really deep eave in the back because we're also going to use it as storage. And I'm not sure yet what my eave is going to be like in the front of the structure. We're going to have to play that by ear and see what it looks like. All right, now this middle post on both sides is in brackets instead of in concrete, which is great, except that there's some wiggle and some movement. So I have to make absolutely sure that these are plumb before I secure them to that header. This one looks good. My second post is plumb, so I went back and secured the back part of that rafter. So now this post is not going anywhere, and all that remains is to plumb this side up before I secure this rafter. And you can see I've got kind of a long way to go to do that. So I'm gonna have to pull this post quite a bit this direction. Have I mentioned lately how much I love ratchet straps? So I hooked the ratchet strap up to these posts here, and because this one's set in concrete, it's not moving anywhere, and it was able to suck that nice and plumb. And now I'm in good shape. I'm gonna set that rafter, and then this will be really stable. My rafters are secured, my posts are still plumb. Time to release the ratchet strap. I invested a lot of time and effort to plumb these middle posts as I was setting the back rafters. They are already plumb, and so putting these front ones on should be much faster. I just have to take that measurement, and I can do that because I can see now what that back eave looks like. I actually need to consider these middle ones. Instead of joining the rafters in the middle butt to butt like I'm going to do on the sides here, I'm actually going to overlap them. And you want a good overlap. So I'm going to shoot for 4 feet of overlap. But before I set the front rafters on the end there, I'm going to do that in the middle and see where I wind up, just to make sure that I have plenty of lumber. I've started my rafter mock-up for the rest of the boards, and I've secured with 1 screw all these rafters here at the back because they are where I want them in terms of distance apart. And they're not all even distance apart, but they're pretty close, and they're close enough that no one's going to notice. And then you can tell with this one in the middle there, I'm mocking up how far out the eave is going to extend at the front. This board on the edge is a 2x6 that I found that I didn't know that I had, and it's the shortest one that I have. So yes, I'm going to cut it to sit butt to butt with that one on the end. But right now I just wanted to throw it up there and see what it looked like. Ultimately, that board, being the shortest, is going to dictate the eave at the front. So that board, again, the one on the edge there, is sticking out, probably a little better than 2 feet out past that front header. And I think that's sufficient. I think it'll look just fine. So the board on the inside, that means, is going to actually sit back further that direction. Because that board is going to be drawn back, I'm going to have probably close to 5 to 5.5 feet of overlap between the back rafter and the front rafter. That's a good thing. It's going to provide more stability. A couple things about setting these front rafters here. So over there, you can tell that I butted them together, and there's an identical plate on the other side there. And that hardware will hold them together pretty well. They're also right on top of the middle header. right there. Something I did discover in this process is that when I set the height of the middle posts, you might recall I did it in a bit of a redneck fashion with a ratchet strap. And lo and behold, it was not an exact measurement. Now I have to come along here with my front headers and I have to notch out some of the top so that this 2x6 sits in there. So the way that I'm doing that is by taking my saw and setting the depth of the blade so that it's about right. Going in a couple of times, and then I'm taking my trusty hammer here and just busting out these pieces. Like so. And it's going pretty quickly doing that. And then when I do that, and I set these middle boards, I wind up with a nice straight line all the way from the back to the front. I'm about to finish notching this one out and then move this board over. My shortest board meant that I had a 23-inch overhang in the front, so that's what we went with all the way across. So as I've been putting these 2x6s up here, I've been measuring 23 inches right there in this case. And so I know that that has to be at the front of my header when everything is said and done. And then those boards will all be the same length all the way across. All right, so that is sat right down in there. And now my check is to make sure that they're flush on top with each other. And then I'll take my screws, and I've been screwing them together with 3 on this side, and then on the far side down at the end there, 3 on that side. Some of my boards here you might see are shorter than others. This one, for example, I trimmed, and I trimmed it because the end of it was really split out. So I just didn't want to mess with that. It was going to be more trouble than it was worth. So I trimmed it off. But I still have a nice 3.5 feet or so of overlap there. So I'm happy with that. Let's talk a little bit about the hardware I used for the rafters. So as we all know by now, I'm a little bit of a scrapper and a scrounger. So these brackets are great, and I came up against a bunch of them at a yard sale. So I've been dipping into my yard sale stash of these for this project. This is at the back of the woodshed. Over here in the middle, across these middle joists, I used hurricane ties, and these are called hurricane ties. I've noticed it's really useful to have the vocabulary when you go to the hardware store. And one thing I do want to point out is that while you can only see one hurricane tie on this side, I actually came across the front of that header and put hurricane ties on the other side. So in addition to these rafters being joined in the middle here, they are also sandwiched between 2 hurricane ties there. Back to my yard sale stash for the front, and these are very beefy. And I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. In a future video, I'll talk about this blocking that you see. But using these kind of beefier hangers here at the front was useful because not only did it allow me to secure a significant portion of the rafter at the front, but also it gave me something to butt those blocks up against as I was going.